in today's Hollywood climate, there isn't too much room for adult-orientated mature dramas from filmmakers like Michael Mann, director of Last of the Mohicans, Collateral, The Insider and Heat, the classic cops and robbers flick in which Mann pitted veteran actors Al Pacino and Robert De Niro against each other, the first time the duo were ever on screen together. As such, many have to use other means to tell the stories they want to tell. When the virus pandemic hit, Mann was in the middle of production on the pilot to his HBO series Tokyo Vice, a crime drama starring Ansel Elgort and Ken Watanabe, which focuses on an American reporter in Tokyo who looks to take on one of the city's most powerful crime bosses. He had shot 6 days out of the required 12. In a recent interview with Deadline, Mann, whose last film was Black Hat, released in 2015, revealed that he plans to return to the big screen. As many will know, Mann has long since planned to write a prequel novel to his 1995 film Heat, which is set to be released later this year. However, according to the interview, Mann would be looking to turn the book into a film. When asked about the novel, he said, "It's a stack about 10 inches high on my desk right now. We're on it, and I'm putting time into that and a screenplay I can't tell you about, but I absolutely want to make a movie of the Heat prequel." Interestingly, the original Deadline article also mentioned Mann wanting to make a sequel to Heat, but that has since been deleted. Maybe it was an error. The plot details of his book have yet to be revealed, but according to a report that came out a few years ago, it is supposed to chronicle the formative years of homicide detective Vincent Hanna, Al Pacino, Neil McCauley, Robert De Niro, Chris Shihelez, Val Kilmer, Macaulay's accomplice Nate, John Voight, and other characters. I'm intrigued by Mann's new show, and I'll be looking out for it. And as I mentioned in my video where I go through my top 10 favourite film directors, I absolutely adore Michael Mann, and he is one of my absolute favourite movie directors. The Insider is one of my favourite films. It's such a tour de force in how to make an engrossing picture. And then there's Heat, of course, which gave every crime movie fan their dream in seeing De Niro and Pacino face off against each other. Has an incredible set of characters and one of the best shootouts in Hollywood history. Not to mention Last of the Mohicans, Collateral, Thief, and Mindhunter. With all that being said, I think a prequel movie to Heat is a terrible idea. One that is only asking for trouble. Don't get me wrong, I've got nothing against the novel. In fact, I want to read it. The characters in the movie Heat were so well developed and the world building was excellent. By the time we met the characters, many of them were already veterans in their respective fields. It would be cool to see how guys like Hannah or Neil got to where they did, or how Nate and Neil met, among other stuff. But to make a movie about that invites many problems. For one, unless you're going for some crazy de-aging a la The Irishman, you're going to have to recast the characters, and one of the whole draws of the original film was the great cast. How would it work? Would we get young, famous Hollywood actors doing their own thing in the movie, or unknowns doing impersonations of the likes of Pacino, De Niro and Val Kilmer? Who would want to see that? And also, one of the age-old problems with prequels is just how interesting will the story be when we know how the characters end up? Maybe if they tackle one of Hannah's cases that put him on the map, or Neil's crew pulling off a daring heist, but those two characters would never meet in the story, so it would be a pretty weird premise, unless the focus of the prequel is not all the characters, but say only a film about Hannah, or just about Neil. If that's the filmmaker's thought process, then I think the idea makes a lot more sense. And then there's Mann himself to consider. This idea isn't exactly striking while the iron is hot. When he made Heat, he was in his prime. It's arguably his best film and is surrounded by great films. He had just made Last of the Mohicans and would make The Insider a few years later. But let's face it, Mann's previous film Black Hat was dire, boring and forgettable, and the previous films weren't much better. Public Enemies could have been a much better film, and while Miami Vice has its fans, it's kind of boring. It's like since Mann started tinkering around with digital cameras, the quality of his movies gradually decreased. He isn't the filmmaker he once was, and if I'm brutally honest with myself, not the man I'd trust to direct a Heat prequel. And why even risk tarnishing the name of Heat Why not make a new crime film that's unconnected? How many times has a veteran filmmaker gone back to something that he's well known for and it turned out to be a success? George Miller with Mad Max Fury Road, Martin Scorsese going back to gangster movies with The Irishman, but the list of successes are too few. Whereas the list of failures, you've got Ridley Scott returning to the world of Alien with his Prometheus and Alien Covenant, George Lucas with his Star Wars prequels, Peter Jackson's stupid Hobbit movies coming after the brilliant Lord of the Rings films. Even in the book world, J.K. Rowling sending fans into murderous ecstasy when she made Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. Once these guys have made a great film, more often than not they should just leave well enough alone and allow their baby to stand tall and proud, or in some cases, pass the torch to a competent director in his prime, a bit like what Ridley Scott did with the Blade Runner sequel. If you want to revisit that kind of world yourself, make something new. And that's what I think Michael Mann should do. I would love to see a new crime film from him, just not a prequel to Heat. It's perfect. You did an amazing job with it, now please, leave it alone. Just as a footnote though, a prequel to Heat isn't the craziest idea Michael Mann has ever had. Heat itself is a remake of Mann's own movie, LA Takedown, which was only 6 years old when Heat was released. If a director announced that he's remaking his own film, we'd all think he's crazy. But that's what Mann did, and ended up making Heat. Still though, that was a long time ago, and LA Takedown isn't exactly a classic. So what do you think? Do you want to see a prequel movie of Heat? If so, how would you go about doing it? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching.